Hello, Charlie. How are you?
I am good. How are you, Dan?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Is that a genuine good? Because I know I've just caught you off the back end of a busy morning. If you had to
Yeah.
use one word to sum up your morning, what would it be?
Um, Chaotic.
Really?
Yeah, but in a positive way. Like
Oh,
there's
good.
just lots of things kind of transpiring at the moment, so it's quite exciting. So
Oh, good. I think
like I function better at chaos than flatlining.
yeah, I often joke I just operate on like low level anxiety, and actually it's fear of actually just sitting with myself, which is what keeps me going most days.
Extremely self-aware. Yeah.
I'm not sure that's the truest reflection. I saw you shoeing the dog as well. Was that for a little bit of soothing and comfort?
It's more she will sit there and cry through the whole podcast if she doesn't come in now. Are you in? Are you out? And they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, both.
I've had to leave Daisy in the house because my office at the end of the garden. Yeah, because she will just paw at my leg for a cuddle, or she'll want to have a look at who I'm speaking to.
Yeah, she's pretty good. She'll chill down there. She might get a little bit curious and come and try and sniff the mic, but other than that, she's pretty chill.
Nice. Thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you for bringing me on. I'm excited.
No, not at all. How did you find Fit Expo?
It was really good. You know what? It was really nice to see diversity, I think, on the education stage, which was really refreshing. And it was really nice to see the education stage really busy for the whole weekend, which is cool. Um, it was great, obviously, seeing everybody. I think what really struck out for me, kind of the area that I now work in, is there's still so much need for the discussions that I guess we're having, which I'm sure we'll get into. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means we need to keep talking about this stuff and that people need our support. So yeah, it was a good weekend. How did you find it, apart from tiring?
Apart from tiring, yeah, I get essentially overwhelmed by the end of the day. I just have to lock my back. I think last year I actually locked myself in the toilet for 5 minutes just to get a little recharge time. Yeah, literally that, just staring at the wall. I really enjoyed it. It's just that, as you say, they're so full on, and I am seeing leaps and bounds of progress. But as you say, I feel like there is still much work to be done. But that said, is I often have people that will say, "Do you think the industry is changing?" And I think possibly, but also the biggest change I see is my echo chamber. I think,
Yeah,
and I think that's
100%.
largely what we're going to get onto today. So we're going to get onto what you do professionally. I think we all fall into that. Like what we do is a massive part of our identity, and we
Yeah.
solidify what we know. And I think that's all valuable stuff. But if you wanted to give people a little insight into you, what you value, and what you think's most important for people to know about you, what would you say?
So obviously I'm a coach myself. I predominantly now support women out of the other side of extreme fitness. So a lot of that might be bodybuilding or being coached in a way which is like bodybuilding-esque, which has maybe skewed their relationship with food and their body. Um, my kind of values as a coach are integrity and authenticity. That many of which values maybe I didn't have when I'm in my bodybuilding times. I've definitely developed as a person since being in the fitness industry. And really for me, I just want to make a big impact on the industry, a really positive impact. I can see, as we just touched on, there's a lot of need for that kind of support in the industry. So for me, it's making sure that I'm having that impact. I'm taking what I've learned from as being an athlete in my bodybuilding days and then coaching, merging those together to try and make as much positive impact for the people that need it, really. But yeah, just being kind of really, really authentic and kind of coaching with integrity, which I think can be skewed in certain pockets of the fitness industry. And I know I've definitely been guilty of that before previously or subject to it as well. So yeah, just making positive impact.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think you don't want to be complicit in being an enabler as such. But I think back to possibly when we both getting into the industry, it's a little bit of, in the politest sense, monkey see, monkey do, because a
Oh,
lot of the people
100%.
that you aspire to be like, the ones that professionally are having their voices heard as well, the professionally people that are on a pedestal as authorities, they're there because they do some of the things that we did. So you naturally think that is the career progression if I focus on aesthetics. And probably off the back of for Expo, I wondered how you found that experience from I guess you've become the coach that you felt you needed back then, even if you didn't recognize it now. How do you find it being in that environment with so much of that still there? And I try not to be judgmental of it, but I look at a lot of the conversations I have quite curiously because I see people that maybe don't have that level of awareness just yet, but you can kind of, they almost scream the change that you want for them, but obviously you can't make anyone do anything. They've got to come to those realizations themselves.
Yeah, I do. I get it, because obviously I was that person as an athlete. Like, and there is definitely a value in going through it yourself and arriving at the place at the right time for you. And I definitely know that, you know, if you'd have told me this 10 years ago, what I'd be doing now, I wouldn't have had any link to it. It wouldn't have made any sense to me. So there is very much a point of people have to arrive at it in their own time when they're ready to receive the information. It's when it's going to be most impactful. But what I think I find quite difficult in the industry, and I guess the gap that both myself and Danny working together are trying to bridge, is that it feels like two opposing camps, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And I think the way that we're going to communicate to people that need our support is to actually recognize we're all part of the same industry, and, you know, we all kind of get in this for the same reason, which is to help people. It can feel a little bit like, you know, you're elite fitness and pushing a certain, like we say, pushing aesthetics and on this side of the fence, or you're really far removed from it. And I think that can kind of sometimes stop people from actually getting the support that they need, because they feel like they have to choose a camp. So really what I guess I'm trying to do, and similar, you know, with the work I'm doing with Danny, is to stand in that middle ground and say, right, let's meet you where you're at. I get it. I've been there. Let's see if we can kind of open the door for people a little bit, because like you say, you know, you go to something like Fit Expo and it is easy to see, you know, the glorification of like certain sports and how great it all looks, and it's hard to get through to those people when they're in that headspace. But yeah, I've tried to be the voice that I needed, the voice of reason, without, like you say, being too judgmental, because I had a great time when I was, you know, bodybuilding. I'm not going to pretend that it was like it's a horrendous thing the whole time. And I think coming at people with a "you shouldn't do this" approach isn't helpful for them to actually get the support. They need to see that actually there's support out of the other side when they're ready.
Yeah, it has that paradoxical effect almost, exactly the same as I guess weight stigma does. Is, you know, there are people that realize they perhaps want to make more healthful change for themselves, but how that's always presented and perpetuated in the media is this is this is unhealthy, and you need to do that, which we know when you impose shame, ridicule, and mocking on people like that, is it just forces them to withdraw, retreat, go back to what's comfortable. So you spoke of meeting people where they're at. Where were you at? What was your inclination to get into that sport? What prompted you to get there, and what kind of reflections can you make now?
So getting into bodybuilding, like initially, honestly, so I started getting into bodybuilding 10 years ago. So we're talking before Instagram hype, before any of that. Women, people say, oh, you know, women in the weight room. Women were not in the weight room 10 years ago. Like, it was like, you know, everybody would turn around and be like, what's going on, sort of thing.
Were you in Miami Pro?
No, so I was going to do a Miami Pro show, and then I ended up actually getting sponsored and going out with NABA. So, and it overlapped, and then I kind of.
Oh wow, okay, yeah.
Miami Pro was
that was my first show, yeah, and
Oh,
same, it
really?
wasn't really, yeah, 2012.
So I was like started 2013, competed 2014. So back then you had what, like three big federations: UKBFF, NABA, Miami Pro, all did slightly different things.
Yeah.
That was pretty niche. And I just literally I started training with some male friends. They were resistance training. I was like, fancy a little crack at that. Realized I enjoyed it. Body started to naturally develop. And people said, oh, you know, you should compete. Have you heard of the bikini category? Famous last words, you should compete. And it just kind of went from there then. And people say like I got the bug, like it just kind of was a bit of a whirlwind. And it was the majority of my 20s were spent competing. I'd come from a dancing background, so I'd kind of gotten into training to fill that gap, because obviously I was high output with dancing. I was like, I need to keep myself fit, I need to keep myself strong, so do this instead. And it kind of just took off from there. Stage experience, training. Thought this is great, get to get on stage and train all the time. Best of both worlds. Obviously didn't see the underside of it at the time.
Yeah, I guess there's an element that there are parallels to dancing, right? In that you are objectified to a certain degree. You know, I don't think that's a distinctly female thing. I think men are as well. You're judged on your appearance. And I felt like certainly I went from being in a much larger body in my teens, not really having an interest in health and fitness, to the ridicule and everything else that came from that, to looking to strangers the opinions of strangers to judge me on my appearance to make myself feel better. Strangely, that didn't really work. I can't really work out why. But yeah, you have
In
those
my head, the
wonderful,
validation made sense.
yeah, you have those wonderful realizations in hindsight. But at the time, it wasn't that obvious.
Mhm.
And did you notice parallels with dancing and kind of having to fit into a certain mold and the identity that came with it?
I guess so. I think with the biggest thing, I guess looking back, that it's very easy to fall into a rabbit hole with bodybuilding, isn't it? So you think, yeah, this is great, and it's I'm getting judged on my physique. And at one point, I think at the start, I could see it separately. I was like, right, just like I would get judged for performance because I can dance competitively, I'm building this physique and I'm getting judged on the physique, and the physique is not me. And this is just something I do. And I very much initially had that relationship with it where it was like me getting on stage to dance, it was me getting on stage to present a physique. As time went on, and I definitely think I spoke about this at Level Up last year, if you look at the correlation of bodybuilding kicking off, Gymshark kicking off, Instagram kicking off, they all kind of happen at the same time. So as it became a thing of like, oh, well, if I talk about this online and then people are interested, and then now it's a part of me, and then all of a sudden it's your identity, and you kind of don't see that happening, the two things kind of merging. So I think there were some similarities in how I presented it. I think I was looking back, it was normalized to me to be judged on my body. Like, yeah, I get down into a cat suit, I need to look a certain way because I'm competing and I need to be in that costume and whatever. Like, that was just normal to me, which now I look back, and obviously I coach a lot of women, and maybe they've been dancers in the past, they have these conditioned beliefs. It's taken me a long time, obviously, getting into my adult life, to think, wow, I just grew up with that as a teenager, thinking, yeah, it's just normal that you just have to diet to get into that costume, and yeah, how you look is part of how you're judged. And it's no wonder that I ended up then falling into an arena where being judged on appearance was normal.
Do you think that's part of it? You just weren't phased by it? Because I guess for a lot of people stepping into that world, it is quite an intimidating space.
I think initially it was completely a smooth transition for me, because I was used to being on stage, I was used to being judged, I was used to my parents being part of that package. So the initial transition, I don't think it was daunting at all. I really actually enjoyed the first few years, but I think it's just because it was a seamless kind of from competitive dancing into competitive bodybuilding. For me, it was when it got more serious, the kind of came like the identity attachment, the Instagram, the whole everybody following your journey, the expectation. That's when it started to get heavy for me. And I guess the sport, as you know, as you've seen, like competitive athletes, the conditioning's got more intense over the last 10 years, less attainable, a lot more risk involved. The weight that you're bearing with it comes a lot heavier.
Yeah, absolutely. You're constantly scrutinized, and I'm always with the lengths. Perhaps we can touch on this later, but the lengths that people will go to for these sports as well now, because arguably it's one of the only sports I can think of, and it certainly isn't to rag on bodybuilding because I learned loads from that process, but arguably it's acceptable that you get shitter the closer that you get to competition, because
Yeah.
actually from a performance standpoint, because you're not assessed on those metrics, if you like, how
Mm.
strong you are, but you don't feel your physical best, even though arguably you look your best. And the problem that we have in fitness is that's glamorized, that's the epitome of fitness. So when people have these mad aspirations and I want to reach 3% body fat, is really difficult to communicate that that's not healthy. So I found it almost contradictory in my coaching, in that I went through a phase coaching people through physique competitions, through photo shoots, and just seeing how much it affected them towards the end, and being like, this just does not feel right for me anymore.
Yeah. It can feel extremely inauthentic, can't it? Because you feel it's like incongruence with what you're trying to preach and promote. And we know that there's that kind of the bell curve, right? Where you're like, yeah, you will be. And it's like, if you look at a competitor's prep, like they'll be training, then they'll be adding cardio in, then they'll get to make a peak performance probably halfway through the prep. And then you come down that slope out of the other side where it's now all the performance markers are going in the opposite direction. You are very unhealthy. But like you say, your physique is at its peak. And I guess it's those blurred lines, isn't it, of what the aesthetic that we are attaching to what we as a society see as fitness, which bodybuilding has absolutely influenced. And, you look at those first initial Gymshark athletes with Steve Cook, and they're all competitors, right? So that is obviously influencing in men's health and women's health, what we expect fitness to be. But we know from getting there ourselves, from clients going through those things, that is not when we're at our peak fitness at all. It's arguably our unhealthiest. And it's so hard to kind of get that message across to people, I think, because we are in such an aesthetic driven industry as well. So yeah, and I completely hear you on that, because I think I found that really hard in my coaching career, because I initially, before I kind of went down this direction, my partner at the time, he does a lot of transformations, that kind of thing, and I was doing them and I was thinking, yeah, it doesn't feel right. It just feels so, I can't do this to people. I'll still support some people if they want to do a show as a challenge, like a pure elite, just being like, oh, I just want a bit of a goal. It's obviously not my main bag. I've got the skills to do it. I don't promote that I do it. I'm not a prep coach. But there'll be some clients I've coached for a long time. They'll be like, oh, yeah, fancy a bit of a challenge. But yeah, I very much think I can't do that to people. And like you say, the effects of actually getting to that peak for a lot of people affect them for a hell of a lot longer out of the other side, and actually kind of undo the work that you be wanting to do with them.
Yeah, I think that speaks to your integrity, without making you feel uncomfortable giving you a compliment there, because I think that's a difficult thing for people to wrap their heads around in our industry, is when you have such a unique skill set, if you like. I guess a lot of people would look at you and go, well, you've got this skill set that's being totally underutilized that you could capitalize on, but you're standing firm and choosing not to. And I have so much personal respect for that, because I know how much difficulty that presents as well. Let's truthfully speaking, our industry is built off diet culture and, as you say, aesthetics, to, I guess, market your services around something less tangible, as this person's lost this much weight, this person looks incredible, this person's photo shoot, etc., does make that more challenging.
And I think it's being clear on your own values, isn't it? Like, we talk about this to clients all the time, but from a business perspective, if I say that I want to be authentic and integral and I want to have impact, there's such a deeper meaning to that than getting somebody shredded. And I think, yeah, like there is that. And obviously I've been through that kind of phase, like, oh, do I do it? Do I not? Like, we've all got a business push at the same time as our own personal integrity. But for me, that cost of integrity is like, yeah, like you can make a little bit more money, but really, like, if you can't sleep at night because it doesn't sit right with you and you're panicking all the time about your clients, and it's like a constant low level anxiety of like, I don't want to be doing this, doesn't feel right, I'm worried about this client, probably similar to yourself, like, all of your clients, so you worry about people, and you genuinely care. So for me, it's kind of weighing that up of like, yeah, could I capitalize it on it? Absolutely. I definitely prefer being able to sleep at night and actually enjoying being in my business. I don't just want to make money. I want to have a great career, make positive impact, and just enjoy what I do. And if I was doing something that wasn't congruent with me just for a financial gain, it'd be so unaligned with who I am and what I want, really, from what I want to do.
Yeah, a lot of that resonates. I made a very similar decision back in 2019. I think the last time I decided, like, I just can't do this. It just doesn't sit right with me. No matter how kind of rewarding, I guess, other people saw it as, it just wasn't to me anymore. You spoke a little bit about red flags and how you get totally immersed in this environment where much is normalized, which at the time you don't recognize that's not normal. No. Flicking out grains of rice on the scales, or weighing out your protein powder, or weighing out your creatine and having to buy the little microgram scales and things like that. What were the things that stood out to you most that you can now reflect on and think, I knew something wasn't quite right with this?
For me as a competitor, it was really the fact, I think I got to a point where, so when I chose to stop, and when I kind of got like, this is it kind of moment, I was kind of chasing the pro card. I was coming first at a lot of NPC shows all over the world, in that kind of top, like, yeah, next time you're there, just keep showing up. My health was absolutely in the toilet. Like, my face was just destroyed. I was looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, who are you? Like, it literally got to that point where I was like, I look so unhealthy. My relationships were in absolute tatters. So obviously, when you're that deep into the sport and you're pushing your physique that much, you haven't got energy for anything or anybody else. So I was completely isolated. my relationship with food was just the worst. And actually, again, like it's so normalized when you're in the echo chamber. My partner was a bodybuilder at the time. I was actually coached by, and he's a great coach. Jordan Peters actually took me through my prep. So you can imagine the intensity at which my
He
my
preps
prep
me for my
were.
2013 show.
Yeah. So
WBJP,
obviously
yeah.
he's through and through bodybuilding. So I was very much in it at that time. There was nothing else. Blinkers were on. I remember I had eaten, I was like absolutely, so I was on probably about 800 calories, right? In this prep, starving, absolutely starving. And I'd put something in my mouth that shouldn't have been there. And I chewed it. And then I had it in my mouth for a second and I spat it in the bin. And I was like, what am I doing? What am I
Mm.
doing? And I was just kind of in that cycle of doing that. And I thought, I know it's not healthy, but this is detrimental. And I came second again, like however many show, and I just got off stage and cried and just thought, I can't do this anymore. There's no enjoyment there anymore now. This is taking more from me than it's giving me.
Mm.
And I think sometimes we can glorify nowadays on Instagram that kind of like that grind and that being in the trenches and that kind of, you know, pushing and don't give up and whatnot. You need to know when to give up. I think it's really a really important trait is actually knowing when it's a sunk cost element. People are carrying on because they've sunk so much time. They've, you know, done so much to get to where they are. You know, just one last one, just one. Like knowing when to pull the plug is very important in anything in life, right? That actually just committing yourself because it's a sunk cost is only going to get you deeper into the hole. And if you'd have said to me in Prague when I came second on that show and decided that was it, I'd have been devastated because I didn't get my pro card. Worst thing in the world. Now it's the best thing that ever happened to me because I would have carried on. I would have carried on being in those trenches. So it's kind of trusting, knowing your intuition and trusting yourself when you know it's time.
I think that's such a valuable point. And I also think that's something that's massively underrepresented in our industry is that just change your mind. If
Yeah.
you realize something is inclusive to what you want to kind of achieve, change your mind. That's okay. But I think, as you say, there's so much social reinforcement that comes with suffering. And I don't know whether it comes from a little bit of a superiority complex for some as well. Just that I need to show others that there's something that I can do that they can't. And, you know, that comes in various incarnations. I suspect, sounds awfully judgmental, that with a lot of cold pool plunging and it just seems to be a different incarnation of it. It's like it seems that the same population that were doing 4 a.m. fasted cardio sessions and reporting it are now doing 2 hour meditations. It's like
Yeah.
everything becomes a flex.
It's like that kind of level of elitism. It's like, you know, like,
Mm.
but like I'm here over the general population because I do this. Well, good for you. You know, like what actually looking at why you need to validate yourself with that external validation. Tell people that you're doing the cold water plunge or tell people that you're
Right?
doing
Yeah.
cardio. That's more the flag that you need to be concerned with. Um, and again, like you say, at that time when it is so normalized, you just don't see that because everybody else in your echo chamber is doing the same thing. And it is kind of just this grapple game of like, well, who can be the most elite and who can be that kind of cream of the crop. And I guess at that time as well, like you've got that notion of like this business attached to that as well. So if you're in the industry as a coach, it's kind of like, well, if people see me doing this, I am this elite coach, and then people will want to work with me.
Got to
Uh,
walk the talk, right?
yeah, yeah. But interesting is that we talk about that, right? Like you've got to have walked it, and you've got to have practiced what you preach and whatnot. But really, practicing what you preach is how you carry yourself, right? Like you act in line with your values as Dan, not you doing a photo shoot because that's what three of your clients are doing.
Mm.
It's you being like, right, these are my values. Look at me acting in line with my values, what's important to me. And that's what I'm telling you to do. 40 of you are all going to have different values. I can't walk the walk of everything that you're doing. So I think reframing like how we see that is quite important.
Yeah, the embodiment of practice. But I think when people think of the embodiment of practice, they think of the physical embodiment of that.
Yeah.
To the point without it sounding like a total whirlwind I've just spoken in, it almost becomes a disembodying process in that I guess we both would have experienced people and probably been there myself, is where much of your life is just totally disembodied. It's in your head, as you say, blinkers on.
Yeah.
And when you was talking about your little stories there, I was thinking of accounts of, towards the end of a prep where we'd agreed to go, my wife and I would agree to go shopping for the day. And I was so exhausted, I slept in the car.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel quite ashamed of that now because that was something special we were supposed to do together. I was so physically exhausted. I slept in the car. I went to one of those, London often has those like American or they have those stores where they've got like stuff from America, they've got stuff from Sweden. And I was
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
food focused at the time that during a prep, I spent half an hour just staring at the shelves. I didn't even buy anything. I was half an hour in a shop. And those were a couple of the little things. Our engagement party, I was eating up Tupperware, an engagement party that my mum threw for us. And a few of those things I can look at now and cringe at. Just at the time, it was just in my head, it was just totally acceptable. It was, well, these people just don't get me. They just don't
Yeah.
understand what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And
And you look at,
fortunately, I was surrounded by so many people that, offered me the compassion and understanding because I know other people that perhaps didn't have that surrounding them. That could have been the end of relationships.
100%. And like, I will be honest, like the person I was with at that time going through those preps, I was engaged to. I'm not with them anymore.
Mm,
It completely just fell apart. And then when we got out of prep, realized that actually our whole relationship was built on bodybuilding.
wow. Okay.
And actually, we've probably been covering that up with, let's do another show, let's do another season, let's do this, let's do that. When actually, when I kind of went, oh, I don't know if I want to do this, again, that fed into my decision to keep me in there longer because the rest of my life was dependent on it. When I kind of went, I'm just going to maybe step away from this and realized, wow, there's nothing outside of bodybuilding.
How long were you together, if you don't mind me asking?
Sorry,
How long were you together, if you don't mind me asking?
three years, I think.
Okay, so that's not like an overnight relationship. That's quite a
No.
lot of time.
Yeah. And I remember when we actually got engaged, I was 2 weeks out from NPC Benidorm, and we were in Italy, and we got engaged, and I texted my coach and said, can I have an off plan tonight? And she was like, it wasn't JP at the time. She was like, no, you can have steak and chips, but like that's it. And then you think about that right now in out of context, like in a normal scenario, and you just think that's one of like the biggest moments of your life. And actually how warped those moments, like you say, the engagement party, the Tupperware, like well, I'm gonna say you get one shot at it, clearly not, because it didn't work out for me. But these events that are really big events where you're probably not going to get another engagement party or whatever, and how much they can actually, like you say, you don't even think twice. Yeah, I've got a goal. That's what I've got to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just so focused in on that.
I got the biggest amount of grief possible. I went to a friend's stag do in Newquay and I prepared in disposable Tupperware. So, like the Chinese takeaway dishes, the foil wrap with like the cardboard lid. I prepared all my meals for 2.5 days. And I carried a cool box with me that I plugged into the hotel room. And I didn't eat or drink anything. And I got hammered by everyone at the party
Yeah, I
on the
bet.
way there. And I think they were just all recovering on the way back, a 9-hour journey back in the minibus. And at that time, I was so proud of myself. But now I look back at that and I'm still friends. Fortunately, I'm still friends with that person. I was like, I can't believe I did that. But yeah, it's so I've got this goal to achieve and everyone else is the problem. It can't
Yeah.
possibly be me. And the interesting thing about that, I see a lot of that on social media now, is that everyone calling everyone a red flag. And it's like, there's a common denominator here. If like everyone else is a red flag, if everyone else's behavior is the red flag, I think
Yours probably is.
yeah,
Yeah.
look
And
in
I
the
think
mirror.
that's really important because particularly in the bodybuilding industry, what you get is people saying things like surround yourself with people who support your goals, and almost encouraging people to cut people out who would maybe be your friend who's going, hey Dan, do you think that's normal? Or are you all right? Kind of the echo chamber forces people to go, they're not supporting you, so cut them out. And actually what it's doing is slowly isolating you into this tiny little bubble, which is really hard when you've got nobody else. One of the things that me and Danny talk about when we help competitors, or if they choose to compete, is make sure you keep those friendships intact outside of the fitness industry, because that's your kind of grounding normality. And it can really help people to not go down that rabbit hole. So it's kind of like in one side of the echo chamber, you've got people kind of saying that that's a red flag and you should be bumping those friends off. But really, it's what's helping keep you, like you say, you willing, that you were grateful to have those people with compassion around you that supported you when the time was right. Like, they're those people. So it can be so confusing for people. And I think as well, like, that when you say there about, you know, taking Tupperware and things like that, that can be fed as a kind of like, yeah, you can still socialize on prep. No, that's not socializing
You
on
can have
prep.
steak and chips on your engagement. That's fine.
Yeah, yeah. You know what do you mean? You're going out, and actually, it's normal. Like, where the line for normal is, like, that's not managing a social occasion. It's having a Diet Coke, taking your Tupperware, or being told you can have one thing from the menu only. And it's kind of, it's the blurred lines, right?
Yeah. How did you deal with I guess I always describe it as like an identity assassination
Mm,
that comes with stepping away, because part of your social circle, part of your whole world is that world.
yeah,
So when you step away from it, I definitely found I was like, when's the next photo shoot, or when's your next competition, or oh, are you bulking at the moment? And then you've got all these really, well, I guess catastrophizing thoughts in your head about, oh, so does it look like I've put on weight? And it exacerbates all of the concerns you had about your body when you was a competitor.
yeah,
And now you're trying to tear away from it, and everyone's just dragging you back. That's how I felt anyway at the
yeah.
time.
Yeah, I can resonate a lot with that, and it's really hard. I think that's arguably one of the hardest parts of is because you do get so ingrained in it as your identity. Put it this way, Dan, like, there's still some gyms that I go into where I live, and people go, "Oh, when's your next show?" Are you actually joking? Like, do you know me at all? But it is, because that's what people know you as. And that's, I guess, the only thing, if that's what you're putting out for so long, that's the only thing people think they've really got to talk to you about,
Mm.
you know, what you're doing with your body and when's your next show. So I completely resonate with that. I think for me, I kind of threw myself into, so I was a PT at the time, in a pure gym. And I guess the thing that I kind of held on to was, okay, this might be easier for me to keep getting clients because now the general population will be able to identify with me a little bit better. And at that time, I just wanted to be a PT. Like, I come from like retail management. And I guess I was thinking, okay, that'll maybe help my business if that's the route I want to go down. I just kind of didn't put any pressure on myself, but it took me, when was my last show? 2019. I'd probably say up until last year to actually figure out who I was and what I wanted to do. And I think you do have to be so patient with yourself, because people think post show or reversing out of bodybuilding is like a 6-week thing. It's something that is gonna take time. And it does come from that case of like, right, well, exploring different things with your training and allowing yourself to have a bit more flexibility and meet different people. And when you've got a business in the industry, it's kind of, I talk to a lot of competitors that are like pros and they're not happy competing, but they're like, well, what? I'm not relevant. If I stop competing, I'm not relevant. My business is going to kind of collapse. And it takes a lot for people to actually kind of reestablish who they are outside of competing. And I think that can actually be one of the best things you can do if you are a coach, because you realize that your business doesn't have to rely on your body, and people don't actually value you for how you look. You're so much more than that. And I think when you go through that, your own transition, it's very, it's great for like your own self-esteem and your self-worth, because you realize that you're much more multifaceted, you're much more capable, and that doesn't rely on how you look. It can be a very hard place for people to get into, building businesses solely on their next place in, or, you know, their next photo shoot or whatever.
It becomes almost a self-imposed prison. That's kind of how I've described it in the past, is that you fit into this nice little tight box of being bodybuilder, being photo shoot ready, etc. And as you say, that's all people know you for. And you have to maintain that. You have to maintain that appearance. So you engage. I certainly found myself engaging in practices I didn't really want to do to maintain a certain look, because your income's dependent on it. And, when you've got mortgage bills, etc., it's easy to get lost in that trap of it. And stepping away is hard. And you were saying about 2019 wasn't ages and ages ago. And I think my last show was 7 years ago. I still have echoes of that. I still go into those environments, and I find there's an element of self-awareness that comes with it, and constant work, which I think is also under-recognized by people, because when you're in those environments, you can either, I find, you might tell me different, is depending on your frame of mind at the time, accept what it is, what it was, understand where you've progressed, be grateful for that, and move on. Almost, I hate that. I don't want anything to do with it anymore.
Yeah.
That's how I find myself. I switch between the two, but
Mm.
very rational to, oh, I'm done with this.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people go straight there if they've had a bad time, or they get to the point where they're like, I am so done with this, I need to step away.
Mm.
They go straight into, I hate it ruined my life, and now I'm a CrossFitter, or now I'm a yogi. And they kind of go, oomph, identity onto something else. I
Body
think that's part
positivity.
of the process. I think
Mm.
you kind of have to have an initial period of like almost rejecting it, to then kind of, it's like going through a breakup, isn't it? Like it's stages, like I hate them, they're the worst, but okay, they weren't that bad, we both had toxic traits, da, da, da. Like, you know, you kind of come at peace with it over time. And I think it is part of that process people go through. And I think it's quite nice for them to be able to work through that, because a lot of people, I think more so with women, kind of really reject it, and then they don't really know how to take care of themselves, because once upon a time they did love training, and you know, they're like, well, what now? And it can really go the other way, you know, where they're like, actually they just completely stop going to the gym, and
Mm.
they kind of almost self-sabotage, if that makes sense. um
Well, it reinforces
so,
that all or nothing mentality, doesn't it? Because,
yeah,
well, essentially, that is what you're doing for such a long time. Is you are all or nothing. Because I think like a glorified aspect of bodybuilding is, I think we could acknowledge bodybuilding for being hugely unique. Some of the people involved have amazing attributes when you think about discipline and everything else and sacrifice that is necessary, but there is no balance there. So when we're talking about bodybuilding and balance, I think people, they overlap the conversation. Is we can acknowledge that it is this really weirdly unique thing, and the people involved in it are capable of these amazing things, but there's no balance there because they're
yeah,
trying to achieve, arguably, business wise, certain things you have to invest into that if you want a super thriving business and you want to work all the hours under the sun. Something else has got to give. There's no balance there.
yeah,
I think people need to understand that as well.
yeah, for sure, that if you're choosing that, you're choosing to go all in. And I think the problem we get with bodybuilding that we maybe don't get in other sports is, like, this is actually a phrase that my partner came up with, and I'm like, I'm going to steal that. Put that on social media last week. It's Premier League protocols at Sunday League level. So there's no Sunday League for bodybuilding. You know,
Mm.
you can go and go, I'm going to try gymnastics and have a bit of a crack at it. You know, go once or twice a week. Do a bit. You're not going to be an Olympian. You're not going to be dedicating your life to it like an Olympian would. But with bodybuilding, everybody's got the same level of sacrifice, whether you're Chris Bumstead, who's making millions from it. All right, yeah, there's going to be probably more drug protocols or what at the top level. But in terms of how it affects your life on a personal level, the sacrifice level is the same. In regard to there's no entry level. You can't dabble your foot in it. It's, if you're bodybuilding, it's 100%.
Mm.
Um, and for the vast majority who aren't going to be the equivalent of that, the Olympics, or, you know, an Olympian or whatever, that aren't going to be getting a return from it, that level of sacrifice over balance is going to be hugely detrimental for people. And I think that's, I guess, what we're getting now, that people are going, oh, that looks nice, that looks cool, you know, they look strong, or, you know, the girls, it's like, oh, that looks pageantry and glitzy, and, you know, when you do look at it on a stage, yeah, it looks lovely, like everybody looks
Mm.
great, but not realizing there is no balance there, and it is an all-in thing from day one. And the entry level is so low, right? Like, you can just literally pick a show, get a coach, yeah, cool, let's diet.
Mm.
um
Not necessarily from your personal experience, but to that point on like drugs and stuff that you've seen in the past. I think that's still, we teach this line in which I appreciate and I respect a level of transparency. Like when guys, it's mainly guys that speak about it at the moment, and you kind of appreciate the side in that they're being open and honest as possible about usage. But I don't know whether it's entirely ethical to go over it, dosages and things like that.
yeah,
I know, like at the extreme end of females, and possibly what you've seen in others, that there must be huge pressure for women now as well.
yeah, I'm on the same page as you, that I think we need to be talking about it, but we don't need to be telling people what cycle you're on and what dose you're on, because obviously people are going to go, oh, I'm going to do that too.
Yeah, no matter
So
how much you caveat that with, this is what I do, you
yeah,
should not do this. There is going to be a 15-year-old that goes, well, that's what so and so does. I'm going to give that a crack.
yeah, we can have that transparency of, look, this is what I'm doing to myself to get here, without giving dosages. So there needs to be that line there. I think the drug side of things is probably more rife than anybody realizes. And I will be like transparent. I was an assisted athlete, and there's things I did to my body then that now what I know as a coach about my hormone health, things that I just didn't know then about my long-term, just general health. I would not have made those decisions if I knew now if I knew then what I knew now. But it was that pressure. Like it was that, well, the girls that are turning pro are doing it. This is what I'm up against. This is where I want to be. It's a done thing. Again, it's normalized. Everybody's doing it. Let's be honest, like nobody's getting lean glutes as a female naturally. It's just not genetically. We just don't. We're prone to adiposity in that area. Like to get in the level of condition for some of these shows now, I think people would be surprised at how much is.
I see, and again, not necessarily. I don't mean this as in a negative sense. I think this is just an open, transparent conversation about it. I see some women achieving a level of leanness that I don't see the majority of men getting. In fact, I can think of a couple of athletes that spring to mind, and you look at the condition of them, and you're like, "That's incredible." It's an anatomy figure. It doesn't look real. I guess from like observationally, what you've seen in I know yours was, were you bikini? Is that right?
Yeah.
So above that, you would have, I know they change all the time, but it'd be women's physique and then women's bodybuilding, which is less represented now. Kind of like the women's physique and women's bodybuilding. You don't need to go in dosages and stuff like that, but what kind of things are they subjecting themselves to? I think it'd be helpful, just for me in terms of education, but also anyone maybe listening to this.
So there's obviously so much that, and I obviously don't know the full extent. The things that I tend to see a lot of being kind of used are testosterone.
Because you must, dealing with people out the other end of this now as well. I imagine I'm not asking you to breach any kind of confidentiality here, but they must have to disclose some of this information to you if you're working away from it.
Yeah, no, 100%. The most common things I see is testosterone, thyroid, thyroxine used as a fat burner, clenbuterol, and there's an array of other big performance enhancers, like injectable primobolan, anavar. There's a whole kind of sweet shop full. I think the biggest things that you kind of, obviously this is what me and Danny talked about on our podcast actually last week. The problem is when people are saying about informed choices, this is the first generation of females that are pushing drugs this way. We do not have any data for what's going to be happening in 20 years time. So I think that's a really important thing to recognize. And there's people running stacks that are mirroring what men are running. And the health implications, the hormonal implications of that short-term and long-term are huge, absolutely huge. And there's some clients that I've got long-term like thyroid conditions for the rest of their life, exacerbated by the drugs that they used.
Yeah.
And they're young women, like they're not, but at the time you think this is your life, this is what I'm gonna do moving forward. I was very fortunate. I think that fingers crossed, I'm healthy now. My health markers are in a good place. There's effects that the drugs had to my face that I can still see. The other people mightn't, but my face has changed since prior to the structure of my face. And it's kind of just those little flashes where you look at yourself and you go, oh, I did that to myself. That was a choice that I made. And I think those little things, it's not even just the health implications of what you're taking. It's that kind of, there's some things that are just irreversible and you don't know where you're going to be in 10 years. And I think it's very reductionist for coaches to be like, do you want kids in 10 years? And that for it to be there's a vast majority of health implications that come from these things. And I think people would be shocked even in the bikini categories at what's normalized. When I chose to go assisted, I was very much, I've never placed outside of the top 3. I did 15 shows. I was like, right, I can do this and I'm going to push for it. I will get like girls that have done one show that are like, yeah, I want to go assisted. And you think this is how normalized it is now. Or women doing cycles for their first show, because that's what's normalized with coaching.
Yeah. That's really, thank you for sharing that as well, by the way. I wasn't
Right.
just going to depths of that. So I think hopefully everyone will appreciate that. As you say, it's, I know some, again, not to disclose anyone's personal details, but like amateur guys that will replicate what they've heard top Olympia level pros are taking and a little bit more. And
Mm.
be on the understanding that, yeah, I'm going to push this for 2 years because basically I don't want to die. And then I'm going to back off because that 2 year period is when I'm going to make it. You know, they have a clear time frame. And as you say, it's quite reductionist because I think, like, you know, if anyone, male or female, listening to this that may have tried for children, is that's not always a given anyway. And then when you introduce other external agents into these things, that can make things even more difficult. So yeah, it's definitely not a decision to be taken lightly, but at the same time, really appreciate the honesty around the conversation. But I'm glad we're on the same page in terms of dosages and seeing things like that. Because I see a lot of these people get applause for it, and I just think it's cool on one side because it is a honest reflection, but on the other side is, doesn't matter what you say, someone is going to replicate that on some level.
Yeah, 100%. I'd never ever talk about specifics because that's not the aim
Mm.
of the conversation. Um,
Yeah,
the aim of
it's
the
almost an
conversation,
irrelevant detail, right?
yeah, you just don't need that detail to
Yeah.
actually give the transparency of what's going on. It's going to have more harm than good to go any further than that. But I think, you know, reminding people of, like, you know, this is literally what you're getting into, and there's people here that will do anything to, you know, to get a first place trophy or whatever it is, and that's kind of how serious it is. And I think the problem is that it's normalized, that it's kind of like this is just what you do. We're kind of not seeing, actually, it's kind of not normal to take a huge stack of drugs, illegal drugs, to get to a physique goal. And yeah,
It's strange, isn't it? Because we are an industry and a culture of enablers, I think, as well,
mm,
without meaning to be. Because even when you look at Olympic sports and the money that's up for grabs, and you know everything else involved, capitalism and the applause that we get. Do we want to watch our sprinters get slower? We don't, do we?
yeah,
You know, I was a
and
big
yeah,
fan of WWE growing up. What the biggest allure to them was being these stat guys that just incredible, amazing feats. But you hear of not only what, you know, performance enhancing wise, but a lot of them live off of recreational drugs and alcohol to kind of deal with the pain and things like that. So I think we glorify much aesthetics wise to
yeah.
take anything away from that. How do things look differently for you now? Like, how do you notice these little thoughts or the allure to get back into that side of things crop up, or are you at ease with that now? If you don't mind me asking.
Now I'm 100% at ease with it. Like, there's no
Does
pull.
that take work though?
Oh God, yeah, 100%. And this is again something I talk to you about with clients, is that constant recognizing when you're getting the thoughts and actually unpacking them then and there, and being like, where's this coming from? Why am I thinking this? You know, is this me? Is what's made me feel like that? So that you're making sense of when you are getting those little, like, oh, what is it that's enticing me back in? Or, you know, what's what. Nowadays, so far removed from it. My partner at the time still bodybuilds. I enjoy watching it. Yeah, I'll spectate it. Cool. Um, Zero. I couldn't even go into a fat loss phase, down. I'm just like, I don't ever want to have to track my food again. You know, I mean, I think it's because I value the place that I'm in so much now, that I think was the place I always wanted to be in before bodybuilding, but thought that was the route to it, and it was the route completely the other direction. Um, I'm at that place now, and I value that so much. My relationship with my body, like, I'm not body checking, I'm not concentrating on how my body fluctuates. I'm just living my life. And my relationship with food, that I just wouldn't ever want to rock that boat again for anything. I've got so much of my identity that's just not reliant on that at all. My business is not reliant on that at all. I think there was definitely, I thought I was past it probably, was it last year? Yeah, last summer or summer before. Probably about 18 months ago. My best friend won her IFBB Pro card. And when I watched her and it happened, I had that glimmer of, like, I'm going to go again. One
Yeah.
more time, like, one more time. And I actually spoke to Cal Raystrick and was like, right, come on, like, let's do it. And then I just kind of sobered up after the kind of, you get like the glitter crash right after a show. And I was like, what am I doing? Like that,
Mm.
no. But that was kind of the last time I got a little glimpse of thought at it. And now it's,
I think it does haunt you naturally. I think like most people, if they're talking honestly about it, will attest to that, certain associations, because I haven't forcefully gone on anything fat loss wise, but I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu down that is weight-based category. So although I think I've got a good relationship with my body, I think I've got a good relationship with food. Occasionally, if I have to jump on the scales, I don't like it. Like it
Yeah,
does bring
see,
about a lot of those things. And I recently
yeah,
I did it on a whim because I thought it would be helpful for others as well. As I did this like little body transformation just to show how manipulative things can be. So this is on the premise that obviously like carb loading, depletion sessions, water loading,
yeah,
sodium manipulation, all the crazy shit that we used to do, and just rock up one day, take two pictures before and after. I had this idea like 10 days before I did it, and then the last few days before, the association of where I would have done certain things. So like photo shoot, I would have been doing my depletion sessions now, and I carb load on these days, and these days I'll have 8 liters, or all of these little things. And I needed to have a little rational conversation with myself. It's like, oh, should I try and get a little bit of fat loss this week so it comes out? But no, 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 no. What are you actually trying to get across now?
yeah, and kind of re-steering you back onto the
Yeah,
right path.
that was 7 years ago, and still those little inklings. And I think that's important for people to recognise. But any of this ongoing work, is it is ongoing work, is I find, as I imagine you do, when you work with people with a relationship with food, relationship with themselves, is it's almost thought of as a definitive end. This is the outcome. When you're here, it's you've reached the point of enlightenment. You're fixed.
And
That's
yeah,
it. No more work is done.
yeah, people think it's just going to be like, I get people say things like, but it's just really hard to do that, or like to constantly do that. And I'm like, yeah, it is, but like that's life, right? Like it's like exactly like we talk to clients about going to the gym. Like we won't say every morning you spring out of bed, like can't wait for the gym. Like you have to have mornings where you go, right, come on, off we go, let's go and do it. It's the same thing that you have to put work into your relationship with food, your relationship with your body, questioning thoughts, where they're coming from. It just means that actually you put in a position where you recognize them a lot more readily because you've done the initial groundwork. But it doesn't mean that you're never ever doing the work again. Like for me, like you said about then going on the scale with jiu-jitsu, like I'm very fortunate that I'm not in a position to have to look at those metrics anymore. And I think that could have been problematic. So I've not been on the scale for 18 months
Mm.
because I know, and again, I speak about it with clients all the time, there is two goalposts in my head. There is my stage weight and there is my peak off season weight. And no matter how much I try and say I'm past that, if I got on that scale, I would be like, right, where on that spectrum am I? And there'd be some little voice in the side of my head that's going, oh, you're touching 70 kilos. You want to pull that back now? And I just don't want that. So I actually just don't weigh at all. But like you say, if I was in a position where that would become relevant for whatever reason, I know that that little voice would probably still be.
I might add that it's only the last 2 years I've done that for. In fact, one of the first competition I did uh, last year, I deliberately didn't want to jump on scale, so I went in the weight category above me,
Yeah.
which is I was probably around the lower end, but I didn't want that as a stress
Yeah.
because I knew how that could negatively impact me. And, I guess I've been coaching now for nearly 18 years. People would assume knowing better is always doing better, but it's constant work. Like there
Yeah.
is being aware of these things. And also we're incredibly flawed as humans. We're all constantly working.
Yeah. And that's what I try and get across with clients, particularly girls that I'm taking through this process out the other side, is that like, yeah, like I'm still doing the work. Like I'm not like, and I think this is what I don't like, the side of the fitness industry I don't like, where it's like coaches on a pedestal of like, I am the elite and I have done X, Y, Z. Like, yeah, we're all still flawed humans. We're also doing the work. I still get those feelings too. This is what, and I think that's just so much more relatable for them because they might, why am I still struggling with this or with that? It's a natural part of the process. And same as just giving them a bit of space to be able to challenge their thoughts. Like I'll get girls that maybe they put a little bit, or they put considerable body fat on to regain their menstrual cycle, for example, and they're like, you know what, I do want to feel it better in myself, but actually resisting those urges to say, yeah, I need to drop into a full-blown diet phase because that's what I know. Being able to say, okay, well, how do I want to approach this time? And it's all client-led, right? It's them being self-aware of like what's right for them and making informed decisions. And that's half of the coaching process, is teaching somebody to be able to read that in
Yeah.
themselves.
I think that's a whole other conversation because without me pressing my opinions on you now, but I have this thing at the moment, whereas I think from a consumer point of view is people don't necessarily know the depths of coaching, like what it is, how it aligns with them. That it's a collaborative thing. Because I think a lot of delivered products under the guise of coaching, people use the term interchangeably. So it's like, here's your training plan, here's your diet plan, this is coaching, when you and I probably suspect that's not.
Yeah. And that can be really hard, can't it? When you get a client
Yeah.
on who doesn't necessarily realize the level of work they have to go and do, in the sense of, yeah, that's the skeleton of the service. Yeah, of course I'll program for you, and okay, we'll give you some nutritional guidance, but really it's you coming back to me each week and us talking through what's, come up for you, and giving those coaching tools to go away with. And yeah, it can be hard. It can feel like you're kind of fighting that a little bit, because you like you say, you've got these products that are like, okay, well, do I get a training plan, a check-in and macros? And it's kind of like, we're not all on the same board here. Like this, it's not the same thing. But arguably, it's those pre-built products that keep people in these cycles. Whereas if you can actually coach yourself through it, that's what's going to actually mean that you don't have to do it again. And out of the other side, you're in a much better place and you can go off and live your life. And
Well, that's a longer term change, isn't it? And I probably suspect that you're the help that people need, even if they don't realize it just yet. Because I find people, it depends on where they are on their journey. I may have come across people that come to me for coaching that have done various different incarnations of those kind of products over the years, and they're like, kind of just sick of this. Like it's always all or nothing. I just want to work on my relationship with my food. I don't want to worry about what I'm picking off a menu. I don't want to worry about how my body looks all the time. That's less tangible, because you can't put that in a nice little image on Instagram so much. But yeah.
And tough to market, right? Like, how do you market to people when you've not got a visual? It's harder to, you think about a program. What was I saying to a client yesterday on a check-in? It's like, she's like, I went, she went to Centre Parks, and she was like, I just put a swimsuit on and didn't pinch my fat and was just playing with my kids in the pool. And I was like, wow, this would never happen before. That's a progress marker for what we work on. But how do you package that up?
Yeah.
Like, you want a transformation photo and be like, look, this is what we're doing. It's so hard to market that. And exactly as you say, it's hard to market to a demographic that need the help but don't know they need the help. And it's something I spoke about a lot to Emma Story Gordon. Like, she was saying, do you go down the route of, if there is a client that then gets a body compositional change, using a transformation photo because that appeals to the audience you're trying to appeal to, but then getting them in and doing it your way? And it's like, but then that's inauthentic. So it's so hard. But just like we said, like, circling back to the start, like, I'm okay with not having a mega business as long as I'm making the right impact. I'm comfortable, I'm living my life, I'm doing the right thing, and I'm changing things for the better in the industry. That's my currency.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the other side of the industry, right? I think the grind hustle culture has replaced a lot of the elitist body composition stuff, in that we glorify multiple businesses earning certain amounts of money. But, is that avoidance? Is that escapism? Is that this application of, oh God, how deep are we going to go? Unmet or unfulfilled needs elsewhere? Why people throw themselves into business? And on that note, without going down that line, what brings you joy outside of your work now?
Oh, my dog. My dog and my partner, but
I
just
get
my
it.
family life, like, just having, like, we've just bought a house, and I think I just looked around this week and was just like, this is
Well,
really cool.
congratulations.
Thank you. But just being like, this is really freaking cool. Like, we've just got our own space and just time to just be still and together and just connected. And I just really value connection with the people that I care about. God, I'm getting emotional. That's horrible. Like, just because I didn't have that for so long when I was.
I can't cry on my own podcast. That's the problem.
But like, I didn't have that proper connection for so long because I was exactly where you said, in that avoidant state of, like, bodybuilding and this and that and the other. And to actually have that is life changing, because it's like, I've just opened this, like, flourishing part of my life I never had. And I mean, people probably know I'm pretty obsessed with Disney, so I'm an absolute Disney parks nerd. I've got annual passes to Disneyland Paris. If you're not finding me in the gym, you're finding me listening to Disney podcasts, obsessing over Disney.
Those are two things there. Well, three things you mentioned. Dogs, I get it. I love Daisy to bits. She's my furry firstborn.
Mm.
Yeah, the other side of the health coin, I think, which is again underrepresented, is that just meaningful human connection.
Yeah.
There's studies into loneliness and being ostracized and people living longer. Um, it's a massive part of our well-being, social connections, and arguably one that you don't get from the bodybuilding mode. You're making me emotional now. You need to stop. Um,
Breathe.
and the Disney, because the Disney Mila, she's very much into like Disney sitcom type things at the moment. So she's
Yeah.
6. So she's moving a little bit past wanting to watch Encanto 50 times. But I will be, you sure you don't want to watch Encanto tonight? Are you sure you don't want
I
to watch
love
it?
that one.
And I suggested it, and she wasn't actually keen on it because I was going to, like a little day for us, go for lunch and watch the new Little Mermaid, and she's not into it. It's like, but I kind of want to go watch the Little Mermaid.
This is why I had kids. Like,
I'm not ashamed to say, and as weird it would be, I think Ariel was my first crush
oh, wow.
growing up. Yeah.
Wow.
I can
Uh,
justify, not now, I can justify that at being 8 or 9, but yeah,
yeah.
not.
It is funny, isn't it? It's like a whole condition of a society, definitely our generation, that were like just raised on Disney. Like it's
And
part of our
unrealistic
DNA.
expectations.
Oh gosh, don't get me started on body image and relationships that were taught to us by Disney.
That,
But yeah, try to ignore that part and take the good stuff.
yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I think that feels like a good place to wrap up, although I feel like we could chat for ages more.
Yeah.
If anyone wanted to find out a little bit more about you, what you do now, I'm going to speak to your other half, not your actual other half, but the other
Yeah.
half of your business half soon. Where can they go to find out more from you?
So pretty much just on Instagram. So my personal is Charly P Fit. That's with a Y on Instagram. The kind of work that me and Danny are doing together, supporting people post show and also coaches to support their clients in a more robust way in that arena. You'll find us at the flourishing.society on Instagram. And we've got some really, really exciting stuff coming from that over the next 6 months. So we can't wait to
I'm
launch.
excited to see. I really need to change the name of my podcast because I'm having people on that make sense, and I can't call it Ramblings of a Madman anymore. It's not just my mad rambles. So maybe I'll think about that. But if you have listened to this, you do recommend it, please do share it. Let us know your thoughts. Valuable, constructive feedback, always welcome as well. And I will catch you next time.